Hey guys, let's take a look at the top news today on DeepNewz. A lot of interesting stuff going on. Obviously, we have OpenAI's announcement of GPT 4.0 yesterday, and we have Google I/O's AI announcements, which we're going to take a look at in a second. But we've also got things like, again, a little bit from yesterday, Jared Goff signing a $200 million contract, Biden talking about tariffs on Chinese EVs, Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us breaks a streaming record, Red Lobster sadly closing a bunch of restaurants. A lot of people have commented on that. Melinda Gates spinning out from the Gates Foundation and taking 12 billion dollars with her. I didn't know charities could do that. Um, Michael Cohen stuff, etc. If you look at the For You news here, we're going to see a lot of smaller stories, like culture stories, like a Legally Blonde sequel. A story about Kelly Clarkson talking about losing 60 pounds, not an Ozempic. A lot of people had comments on that. Again, the Kendrick Lamar story, and an old story about Steve Buscemi being hospitalized after an attack in New York. We'll also see stories again about Google's TPU at Google I/O. Very interesting story. Take a look at that. But something that you'll notice is we're not showing some of the AI stories. And the reason for that is that the For You does filter out stories I already read and looked at. So, for example, here, unfiltered, you can look at the AI stories right now. Again, we have the OpenAI story from yesterday. We have another AI deep learning MRI story. We have the Google DeepMind Veo, a 1080p video generation AI model. Google doing other unveils. And I think we notice here, definitely from a ranking perspective, the Google stories should rank a little bit higher. They should be a little bit near the top, and we're working on that. I think that obviously the OpenAI story is a bigger story, more authors, etc., but it is a day old. Um, shouldn't necessarily be ahead or behind the Google one, but we're definitely working on further enhancement when something a story is just recent and it breaks. It's going to have fewer authors, fewer support, but still a lot. And we know it's a big story. The model can tell it's a big story. I know these Google stories. They're not going to get to the OpenAI level, but they're definitely going to grow. And I think the model does know that. So, taking a look at some other things. In Elon news, Carnival cruise ships announced that 100% of their fleet is using Starlink internet. This is kind of interesting to me, living in Florida and looking outside my window literally is where the cruise ships roll by, seeing these massive ships. And I've always been marveled by cruise ships. I find them interesting. I'm not that tempted to go, but I kind of want to see how it works. Like from an engineering perspective, how managing this floating city is pretty cool. But now that they have Starlink internet, I definitely think I am going to go because my concern was always like, hey, how reliable is the internet going to be? Am I being able to video conference? Am I being able to get my work done? Can I code? And if it's like, yeah, probably that's not going to work. But if I know it's going to be great, I would very much want to go on a cruise because of the internet, frankly. And obviously, you see something else. Speaking of Starlink, you see Elon donating 1,000 Starlink terminals to the Brazil flood relief. I mean, people have sort of forgotten a little bit about the floods in Brazil, but man, those are bad. Definitely last week's news. Unfortunately, hopefully they're doing a bit better. And the reminder that often the first story is sort of what people remember. A little tricky with the follow up, right? And other sort of AI news. I'm not sure why this matches for Elon, but it is a good story. Kai Fu Lee's AI claims to surpass GPT-4 targeted for the Chinese market. So let's open up that story a little bit too. Let's take a look. Yeah, Kai Fu Lee, yeah, former head of Google China. I remember that. I was at Google at the time. It was a long time ago. Launched an AI application named Wanji through his Beijing-based startup. This free productivity assistant, okay, so very much what people are working on, is the company's first AI product for customers. It can create spreadsheets, slide decks, books, complex tasks, such as summarizing 600,000 word biography of Elon Musk. Okay, hence the Elon connection. That makes sense. Lee emphasizes the need for China to have its own version of ChatGPT. Yeah, that probably makes sense. Hard for us who don't speak Chinese to really build tools given the constraints of the language, especially since OpenAI's product are banned in the country. Yeah, that's unfortunate also. He believes Wang Ji will help accelerate interest, adoption, investment in AI throughout China. Yeah, so that's very interesting. actually kind of an aside, is it really isn't. It is really kind of fascinating how this AI thing has been still, to like a large extent, an American phenomenon. Not to say that people in other countries don't know about it, but obviously it's huge in China. I mean, a huge percentage of AI researchers and engineers that I worked with in Silicon Valley were grew up and were educated in China. Um, but for example, you could look at places like Japan, and they're just starting to really have Japanese language AI models. But it's just a reminder how huge this stuff is going to be everywhere. And frankly, some of these languages probably even lend themselves better to AI, but certainly differently. So very excited about this. Didn't, until we saw the story yesterday, I certainly didn't know that the Kai Fu Lee was working on a Beijing AI startup, but why wouldn't they be? The other story that popped up is, some of you probably saw, kind of a follow up on what's going on in Georgia, the country, not the state. You had stories about, you see 50,000 protesters. I think I saw even higher numbers protesting the so-called foreign agents bill that was perceived by, anti-Russian people as being a pro-Russian bill. I can sort of get into the details of it, but basically, the claim was that there's people in Georgia who work for the government that are agents of foreign, this foreign registration thing. I mean, that's something that happens in America, it happens in all countries. Obviously, it can be used as a tool, sort of against people. And yeah, so the update seems to be the Georgian parliament passes this bill, 84 to 30, which does seem like a pretty strong majority, not knowing a lot of the details. And it is kind of interesting, right? Like, you read these stories about these giant protests, the pictures look big. I mean, you don't really know how it's framed, but it does look like it's full. There's a lot of people really care, but it is interesting, what is really happening there. Are these protests really a big deal? Is it really everybody, or is it, sort of everyone on Twitter who's taking a side? I'm not really sure, but interesting to see an update. Wish we had more. Obviously, it would be great to have sources in Georgian and in other languages, in addition to the English sources. You can sort of see all the sources below, and we have a pretty wide variety. Obviously, we have Washington Post and American sources like that. But we also have RT, Sprinter Factory, which people on Twitter know, Al Jazeera English, a lot of sources, Sky News in England. I mean, a lot of them obviously are sort of essentially copying the small amount of information they have. The Hindustan Times, like, actually adding an India account, they had very good coverage for world news, although for the most part, they're not really doing necessarily, first party reporting. But anyway, that's kind of an interesting story I wanted to see a follow up on, and kind of note that, we do focus on sort of breaking news and new things and novelty, but it is interesting to see how a story developed. So let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think we can look at more stuff, but I kind of want to wrap this up here. So kind of just, let me know what you think. If this is interesting, going over the news. And again, this is the DeepNewz product. Definitely take it out, take a look. You can get personalized recommendations. You do have to create an account, but that's very, very simple. I know a lot of you guys don't want to do that. But you could log in with an email with Gmail. It takes a second, and yeah, you're going to get these sort of like deeper things personalized, and even a small number of reads, where we do filter out stories you already read. Now, I will note one caveat is, obviously, I already read the Steve Buscemi story. We do have an issue where obviously we're updating these stories, and I think that there is sort of a logic bug where we're, we know you read the previous version, but we're not necessarily excluding you from future updates on that story. And I think we probably should. So that's something we're going to push. But generally speaking, the idea here and for you would be to see smaller stories or stories that you haven't seen yet, specifically in the categories you care about. So I'm getting economics, culture, crypto. Yeah, Polymarket raises 70 million backed in from Thiel, Vitalik Buterin, one confirmation, and others. So that's definitely a case of a story I absolutely read and shared. This is an update on a previous story. So, probably a little bit of repetition there, but maybe not the end of the world. Yeah, Tornado Cash developer found guilty in 1 billion laundering. Again, another kind of important story from yesterday. Bumble removes controversial anti-celibacy billboards. I remember that sort of chatter, that discourse yesterday. Yeah, and we'll update this later. Probably see a lot more tech stories. Um, Rudy Gobert gets fined 75,000 for making a money reference to the refs. claiming, I guess, that they're bought off or something to call fouls on him. I respect the commitment to this really pretty asinine gimmick. Gotta love to see it. Sort of a relatively small background science story. I mean, that's Demis Hassabis, for those of you who know, founder of DeepMind. So I guess the company that he's associated with is involved in AI drug discovery, basically discovering what compounds should be sent for testing. Very, very cool. Yeah, check it out. We'd love to see more users on For You and sort of let us know what we're doing well, what we're doing less well. Personally, I just like it as an alternative view. I always check top news first. I want to see what are the big things that are happening. And I do think we want to be a little bit more clear what we already saw was trending up versus what's still big. But this view just allows us to, again, dig further into the weeds, especially in interesting topics, even niche topics like chess and things like that bubble up for me, without having to necessarily click through, and find it in this particular way. So looking at, tech, AI, right? Looking at crypto, there's a lot of tabs. Yeah, top story in crypto is the polymarket one, which it should be. So I think sometimes it's a little bit nice to have it in one place, without necessarily showing you stories about Philadelphia, if you do not, in fact, reside in Philadelphia. So let's see. Yep. Yeah, a little bit of regeneration, but a lot of the same stuff. So thank you. Have a great day. And let me know what you think about, some of these overviews. And yeah, I'll be interested now.